They say grief changes you. What they don't tell you is that it's not the grief that breaks you. It's the people who see your grief as an opportunity. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how my husband's death became everyone else's payday. The night David died, I held his hand until it went cold. 22 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and a love that I thought would somehow defy death itself. The heart attack took him at 45. One moment he was laughing at our daughter Emma's joke over dinner, the next he was on the floor, his face contorted in pain I couldn't fix. I was a nurse for 15 years before the kids came. I knew what was happening. I knew CPR. I did everything right. But sometimes everything right isn't enough. The funeral was a blur. Black dresses, whispered condolences, flowers I didn't want. David's mother, Patricia, stood at the front of the church like a grieving Madonna, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. His brother, Marcus, gave a eulogy that painted David as some kind of saint. They didn't mention that Marcus hadn't spoken to David in 3 years. They didn't mention that Patricia had called David a disappointment for choosing to marry me instead of the daughter of her country club friend. But grief makes people forget, or pretend to. "Sarah, darling," Patricia said after the service, her bony fingers gripping my arm, "you must be exhausted. Let Marcus and me help with the arrangements, the will, the estate, everything. You shouldn't have to think about such things now." I should have known then. I should have seen the way her eyes flickered to Marcus, the slight nod between them. But I was drowning in loss, gasping for air in a world that suddenly made no sense without David in it. "Thank you," I whispered. "That would be helpful." The first lie I told myself was that they cared. David had been successful, not billionaire successful, but comfortable. He'd built a software consulting business from nothing, worked 18-hour days for years to make it thrive. When he sold it 2 years before his death, we suddenly had money, real money, the kind that changes everything. $4 million. We'd planned to travel, to give the kids the best education, to finally breathe. David had opened investment accounts, set up trusts for Emma and our son Jake. He'd made sure everything was in order because he was always thinking ahead, always planning for the future. He just didn't plan on his future ending at 45. 3 days after the funeral, Patricia and Marcus came to the house. I was still sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't face our bedroom without David. Emma, 15, was locked in her room, crying to music I couldn't identify. Jake, 12, was pretending to do homework while staring at the same page for hours. "We need to discuss David's affairs," Marcus said, settling into David's favorite chair like he owned it. He was wearing one of those expensive suits that made him look important. Marcus had always been obsessed with looking important. Patricia perched on the sofa, her designer handbag placed precisely beside her. "The will is quite complicated, dear. David made some unusual arrangements." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled out a folder, where had that come from, and spread papers across the coffee table. "David left significant assets to you, of course, but there are concerns about your ability to manage them appropriately." "Concerns?" "You're grieving, Sarah," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You're not yourself. David knew you might need guidance. He established a trust with Marcus and me as co-trustees to help manage the children's inheritance until they're 30. I stared at the papers. The words blurred together. "I don't understand. David and I discussed everything. He never mentioned—" "He wanted to protect the children," Marcus interrupted. "Surely you can understand that. $4 million is a tremendous responsibility, with your emotional state and your lack of business experience." "My lack of business experience?" Something cold settled in my stomach. "I managed our household finances for 20 years. I have a degree in nursing," Patricia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Which is wonderful, dear, but this is different. This is complex financial management, legal obligations, investment decisions. David trusted us to ensure his children's future was secure." The way she said his children, not your children, like I was already being erased. I need to see the original will, I said. Of course. Marcus slid a document toward me. This is a certified copy from David's attorney. I picked it up with trembling hands. The legal language was dense, deliberately obscure, but certain phrases jumped out. Co-trustees Patricia Mitchell and Marcus Mitchell, primary decision-making authority, monthly allowance to Sarah Mitchell for household expenses subject to trustee approval. An allowance from my husband's money, subject to their approval. This can't be right, my voice sounded far away. David wouldn't. We talked about everything. He would have told me. He was protecting you, Patricia said, from yourself. That's when I started to understand. Not the full picture, not yet, but enough to feel the ground shifting beneath me. I want to speak to David's attorney, Mr. Henderson. Marcus and Patricia exchanged a glance. Quick, practiced. Mr. Henderson retired last month, poor health, but don't worry, I've engaged a new firm to handle the estate. They're very reputable. Of course he had. The next weeks were a nightmare wrapped in bureaucracy. Every time I tried to access our bank accounts, I hit walls. Frozen accounts, pending probate, required signatures from the trustees. Patricia and Marcus were always so sorry about the delays, always promising to sort it out soon. Jake stopped talking. Emma started staying out past curfew. The house felt like a prison where we were all serving sentences for a crime we didn't commit. And then the whispers started. I'd see Patricia's friends at the grocery store and they'd go quiet when I passed. Sympathetic looks, knowing nods. At Emma's school pickup, other mothers would glance at me and whisper behind their hands. One day, Mrs. Chen from down the street stopped me in the parking lot. She was one of those people who pretend kindness while delivering cruelty. "Sarah, I'm so sorry about everything you're going through." Her eyes gleamed with false concern. "If you need anything, I mean with your situation and all." "My situation?" She lowered her voice. "Patricia mentioned you've been struggling with David's death, the stress, the episodes." Episodes? The paranoia, the crying fits, forgetting to pick up the children. She touched my arm. "It's nothing to be ashamed of. Grief does terrible things. Patricia and Marcus are saints for stepping in to help with the children." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" But she was already backing away, realizing she'd said too much. I hope you get the help you need." I drove home in a daze. Episodes, paranoia, forgetting my children. They were building a narrative. That night, I found Emma crying in her bathroom. When I asked what was wrong, she looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Grandma, Patricia called today. She said maybe I should think about coming to stay with her for a while, that it might be easier for me, that you're having a hard time taking care of us." "Emma, are you, Mom, having a hard time? Because Jake heard Uncle Marcus tell Grandma that you were becoming unstable, that you might need to go somewhere to get better." The room spun. They weren't just taking David's money, they were taking my children. I held Emma tight. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, I promise." But as I said it, I realized I didn't know how to keep that promise. The next morning, I called David's old attorney's office, despite what Marcus had told me. The receptionist was confused. "Mr. Henderson? He's not retired, ma'am. He's right here. Would you like to speak with him?" My heart stopped. "Yes, please." When Henderson came on the line, his voice was warm but puzzled. "Mrs. Mitchell? I've been trying to reach you. We need to discuss David's estate. When can you come in?" "Marcus said you retired." A long pause. Marcus said, "I'm sorry, what?" That afternoon, I sat in Henderson's oak-paneled office, staring at the real will, David's actual will. Everything to me, full control, no trustees, no conditions, a simple, clean transfer of assets to his surviving spouse, with provisions for the children if anything happened to me. "I don't understand," I whispered. "The document they showed you is a forgery," Henderson said grimly. "A good one, but a forgery. I've already filed a report with the police." But why? Why would they do this? Henderson leaned back. Patricia and Marcus are in serious financial trouble. Marcus's business is failing. He's facing bankruptcy. Patricia's been borrowing against her house for years to maintain her lifestyle. David knew. He cut them off 6 months before he died, said he was done enabling their spending. The pieces fell into place. The urgency of their concern, the control they needed, the narrative they were building to paint me as unstable, unfit. If I was declared incompetent, if they could prove I was an unfit mother, they could control everything, the estate, the children, all of it. "What do I do?" my voice cracked. Henderson's expression hardened. "We fight, and we document everything." That night, I started recording every conversation, every phone call, every interaction with Patricia and Marcus. I bought a small digital recorder and kept it in my pocket constantly. When Patricia came by 3 days later, all smiles and concern, I was ready. "Sarah, darling, we need to talk about your spending. You've been quite erratic lately." "Erratic how?" "Well, unnecessary purchases, impulsive decisions. Just yesterday you withdrew $300 in cash. What was that for?" "I'd withdrawn it for groceries, for Emma's school supplies, for gas." "I'm not sure I need to explain my spending to you, Patricia." Her smile tightened. "As trustee, I'm responsible for ensuring the assets are used appropriately. If you can't account for your spending, we may need to restrict your access further." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality, dear, for your own good." The recorder in my pocket captured every word. Over the next month, I became a ghost in my own life. I said yes to everything. I smiled and nodded. I played the role of the grieving, overwhelmed widow who needed help. And I recorded everything. Marcus talking to his lawyer about expediting the competency hearing, Patricia coaching Emma what to say if anyone asked about Mommy's bad days, both of them discussing how to liquidate David's investments once they had full control. I also started digging into their finances. David had been meticulous with his records, and I still had access to his old email accounts, his filing system. I found the credit card statements showing Patricia's gambling debts, the legal notices about Marcus's business, the threatening letters from creditors, email chains where they discussed their plan months before David even died, like they'd been waiting for this opportunity. Then I found something else: medical records, requests for David's medical history from Marcus sent to various doctors in the months before David's death. Questions about his heart condition, his medications, his stress levels. My hands shook as I read them. They'd been planning this, preparing for it, almost hoping for it. I thought about David's sudden heart attack, healthy one moment, dead the next. No, I couldn't go there, couldn't let myself think. But the thought, once planted, wouldn't leave. The competency hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. Patricia and Marcus had arranged it quietly with a judge they knew. They'd lined up witnesses, Patricia's friends who would testify about my episodes, a psychiatrist who'd never met me but would evaluate me based on their descriptions. They'd even convinced Emma to write a letter about how worried she was about me. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how it ended, if they would win, if I would lose everything: my children, my home, my dignity, the life David and I built. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Mom, I'm so sorry. They made me write that letter. They said it was to help you. I don't want to live with Grandma. I want to stay with you. Please don't be mad." I went to her room. She was curled up in bed, her face streaked with tears in the darkness. "I'm not mad, baby," I whispered, holding her. "I'm not mad at all. Uncle Marcus said if I didn't write it, they'd take Jake away too. He said you couldn't take care of us. But you can, Mom. You're doing everything right. I see how hard you're trying." Something fierce and protective rose in my chest. They'd threatened my daughter, used her fear against her, against me. That was their mistake. The next morning, I walked into that courtroom with my attorney, a real one, the kind who didn't answer to Marcus, and a briefcase full of evidence. Patricia and Marcus sat on the other side, confident. Patricia wore black, playing the concerned mother-in-law. Marcus had his serious face on, the one that said he was doing this difficult thing for the right reasons. The judge, a woman named Harriet Owens, who'd gone to college with Patricia, looked at me with premature sympathy. This was going to be a formality, a rubber stamp on Patricia and Marcus's control. Marcus's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, we're here today because Mrs. Mitchell, while a loving mother, is simply not equipped to handle the complexity of her late husband's estate. In her grief, she's become paranoid, irrational, making wild accusations." "Objection." My attorney, Ms. Rivera, stood. "I'd like to enter evidence." What followed was 2 hours of my life being played back in recordings. Patricia's voice, discussing how to speed up the liquidation of assets. Marcus explaining to his lawyer how they needed to keep Sarah confused and dependent, both of them coaching Emma on what to say. Then came the financial records. Patricia's gambling debts, over $200,000. Marcus's failing business, the creditors circling. The emails showing their plan, laid out months in advance. Judge Owens's expression changed from sympathy to shock to cold fury. "Your Honor," Ms. Rivera continued, "we also have evidence that Mr. Marcus Mitchell requested detailed medical information about David Mitchell in the months before his death, including specific questions about cardiac medications and potential interactions." The courtroom went silent. "We're not making any accusations at this time," Ms. Rivera said carefully, "but we believe this warrants investigation." Patricia's face had gone white. Marcus was gripping the table, his knuckles bloodless. "Additionally," Ms. Rivera said, "we have the actual will prepared by David Mitchell's longtime attorney, Mr. Henderson, which leaves everything to Sarah Mitchell, with no trustees, no conditions. The document Mrs. Mitchell was shown was a forgery." Judge Owens looked at Patricia. Something passed between them, maybe the death of a friendship, maybe the recognition of a betrayal. "I'm dismissing this petition," the judge said, her voice ice. "Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into potential fraud and, given the evidence presented, possible foul play in David Mitchell's death." Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. Marcus was already standing, looking for the exit. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," the judge said. "I don't think you'll be going anywhere for a while." The months that followed were a different kind of nightmare. Police investigations, depositions, media attention when someone leaked that Patricia and Marcus were suspects in David's death. The toxicology re-examination of David's body found traces of medication that shouldn't have been there, medication that, in combination with his prescribed heart medication, could trigger a fatal heart attack, medication Marcus had access to through his wife, who worked in pharmaceutical sales. They never found enough evidence to charge them with murder. The medication could have been coincidental, could have been taken accidentally, could have been anything, but it was enough to destroy them. Marcus went to prison for fraud and forgery, 3 years. Patricia lost her house, her friends, her carefully curated life. She's living in a retirement community in Arizona now, the kind that's really just a glorified apartment building for people who ran out of money. I never speak to either of them. Emma and Jake don't ask to. David's estate was finally settled. The money is in secure accounts, managed by people I trust, invested for the future David wanted for our children. Emma's in college now, studying law. She says she wants to help people who can't help themselves. Jake is in high school, thriving, happier than I've seen him since David died. And me? I moved us to a different town, away from the whispers and the memories. I went back to nursing. It turns out I'm good at helping people who are vulnerable, who need someone to advocate for them when they can't advocate for themselves. I think David would approve. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found that recording device, if I hadn't started documenting everything, if I'd just accepted Patricia and Marcus's version of reality, let them gaslight me into believing I was unstable, incapable, unfit. I would have lost everything, my children, my dignity, my life. But I didn't, because I learned something important in those dark months. Silence isn't strength. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is make noise, document, record, refuse to let people rewrite your story. They thought my grief made me weak. They thought my silence meant consent. They thought no one would believe me over them, respectable, established, connected. They were wrong. Sometimes the wronged don't just survive. Sometimes we win. And sometimes justice isn't about getting revenge. It's about making sure the truth is heard, even when powerful people want to keep it silent. David's been gone 5 years now. I still miss him every day. I still sleep in the guest room sometimes when our bedroom feels too empty. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm living, and so are our children. That's the inheritance David really left us. Not money, not property. The knowledge that we're strong enough to fight for what's ours. And that's worth more than $4 million could ever be.